I just want to put a little postscript about what we mean by quality and risk management in the major consulting firms. I've added the word corporate to it just to try and give a clue about what's different about it. I've only got 2 slides, which is why I've crammed more than 6 points on them. In the first one, just talking about what this process is, that sometimes I refer to as being the internal police force of the consultancy, although really only the last 2 points there are about being the nasty cop. We mostly try to be the good cop, but if you're in a big firm, there will be sets of rules that you have to follow. Some of them are legal requirements, some of them refer to which country you're in, which jurisdiction you're working under. Some of them are just internal choices. And those will be defined as processes to follow, and they will obviously need to be published and shared with you if you're working in that regime. Just to give you a clue, the global manual I had to enforce when I was in charge of quality and risk management team printed out to 467 pages. But the UK version, I can't tell you how long that was because it was kind of a hypertext online tool, so I don't think anyone could print it out, in fact, but there are a lot of rules there. And as well as publishing it, you've got to make sure people understand it, so there are education processes, particularly important for incoming senior staff, because if you bring somebody in who's an expert in their field, bet your life they don't know any of these rules, they're going to trip over unless you've educated them. So even the most senior people need to be trained. And in particular, you need to be trained to achieve a required understanding to be accredited to do stuff. So for example, you would not be allowed to run a job, run an engagement, unless you were an accredited engagement leader. So there was a lot of process to make sure you did actually understand enough to be trusted to be in charge. And all of that's quite tricky, so our team had a dozen people just out there supporting the workforce and helping them get things right. But then comes the policing bit, where we also would review what you did. We would check your files, make sure all the paperwork's done right, except it's all electronic nowadays. And in the event that you had made a significant error, indeed you could potentially suffer some sanctions for it. Sanctions might be you lose your bonus, sanctions might be you lose your job, sanctions might be you just get some friendly advice. But there are people who did such bad things that they necessarily had to move on. So that's kind of the process. And when I talk about the scope here, what would a quality and risk management regime require you to be thinking about? Well, obviously it's got its own processes, and if you're not following them, if you're the sort of person who prefers to write things on scraps of paper instead of using electronic controls and so on, then you're going to be in trouble. Part of it's about your clients. Do you want the client? Do we want to work for a client who maybe is working in a difficult regime? Life sciences clients who experiment on animals, for example, are always very controversial. Do we want an organisation like that as a client? I don't know, you might not, but it needs to be thought about. Conflicts of interest, very important, particularly in those firms that also have audit functions, because you can get into serious trouble if you advise a client to do something and then come in with a different hat on to do the audit to check whether it's been done properly. You could actually be put out of business for making a mistake like that. Then there's legality stuff. Some of you will be familiar with anti-money laundering checks and following the anti-bribery and corruption rules, for example. Very important, actually. You can be put in prison if you try to induce a potential client by offering them something like, so you want to come and stay in my house at the seaside for the weekend, and that would probably be a criminal offence. So you need to understand these rules, and they need to be checked and enforced. When it comes to actually taking on a piece of work, do I actually want to try? Bid, no bid decision. Are we actually going to bother with this opportunity? Somebody says, please can you send in a team to work for me for a half day and sort out my file? And you think, no, not going to do that. What you need is a robust process for deciding that, because someone who's trying to sell the job almost certainly has got this kind of sales instinct. They want to make a sale. They'll go for the job even if it isn't actually worth us doing. So very important that you've got a process behind that. Then you're into the pre-sales and proposal stage. Watch what you say. Salesmen have this slight reputation for exaggeration and saying whatever the client wants to hear. We do need to make sure that there's nothing in the pre-sales or proposals that looks like a contractual commitment to do something that we can't do. That does happen. And even more so when it comes to contract. Does the contract actually protect our position? Is it fair? Does it have a position on liability? And I think if you've been following our talks beforehand, you'll know that if you haven't got contractual terms about liability, that means you have unlimited liability. So if you trip over the wire and the credit card system goes down, then that could cost you millions. Always need to have the right level of senior oversight. So you should never be doing anything with the client that your boss doesn't know about, and the boss does need to check your outputs and make sure they're of the right quality. On to the getting the money in, billing, make sure you've got accurate records, don't fiddle your expenses, make sure you can justify anything that you charge the client when they say, why did you fly to Australia first class? You need the answer to that. At the end of the work, or intermittently during the work, make sure all people on the job have had their performance reviews and been counselled accordingly. So that's a really different take on quality and risk management. And yes, at the end of the job, if you haven't got all of that done properly, when the reviewer comes in, you could be in big trouble. So hopefully you've got friendly police force in your firms if you are working in that sort of regime. Well, just wanted to paint that picture for you. Didn't really want to go into any more depth of it. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, then ask me more some other time.